I would like to welcome to the stage another Pocket Gamer Connects regular to talk about in-app purchase pricing strategy. It's Ted Verani from Wappier.
Okay, start again. Ted Verani, Head of Business Development for Wappier. Welcome to this presentation, Global Pricing in an Inflationary World. What I should do is read a little bit of the news. We know we are living in an inflationary world. Pricing is a topic we're going to talk about. It's also a little bit about the company, what we do. Fundamentally, we're an AI company. We get data from games. We get deep insights into player behavior. We understand the relationship with the wallet, the spending patterns, and we built some revenue optimization solutions around that. Most notably, what we're known for is pricing optimization. So work with a lot of large game developers, mostly in the United States and in Europe. So good to be here. But what we do is, and why we care, why is pricing important, right? You know, it's frankly, most developers have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to pricing. And yet, different people respond to prices differently. And that gets magnified whenever you think about right now in an inflationary world. So as we talk about, people respond differently in different countries already, and that's what we do. But now as inflation also is impacting different countries differently. And so it takes some consideration there too in what you're doing. But first, let's sort of set the stage in terms of why global pricing is important to begin with. I guess I'll start with a question. Do you localize your game? And most of the time when we think about localization, we tend to think about language, customization. I know Tamatan's done a great job in terms of localizing games from the Western countries to bring into the Middle East. You have Babel Games from here, who's done a great job in taking games built here and then making them more global. And so localization has always been kind of core to any global business out there. So the question I'd asked, if you are localizing your game, why aren't you localizing your pricing? Because I kind of alluded to this earlier, there is no one size fits all when it comes to pricing. And while it's better, in currency rate conversion, this is where you upload, it's not sufficient, right? Just upload, because by the way, unless you're going to manually adjusting, whenever you've uploaded your game into the App Store or to Google Play, that's what the exchange rate is. So I was just in London passing through. I mean, dollar is on parity with the pound. Like hasn't been like forever. I went shopping, Dave. So that never happened. So and this is ongoing now. What we're seeing, so it's not sufficient too. But even going past that, if we're going to price to the demand curve, that takes deep insights and understanding of local markets. So that's where you want to go, understanding price elasticities. I'm going to talk about that too. But then also pre-prepared to create hundreds or even, depending on your game, thousands of price SKUs. So that's a challenging environment. We've developed a platform to enable this, but for yourself, yes, you can go into Google Play and do CSV uploads, because it's not just about lowering your price or raising your price, depending on what you're looking at once, but it's about managing the program on an ongoing basis. But pulling it all together, country-specific pricing, is the fastest, kind of most effective way, I think, to improve the bottom line. Because when you think about it, making a game is hard, right? And then managing ongoing, right? We've just talked about, live ops, creating new content, new features, whatever you're going to do to keep people engaged, coming back in your game. Like that's actually really hard. And I don't say pricing is easy. That's what we do. But when it's just one small change to a number, it's all it takes to convert someone into a payer or to keep them paying over the long term. So global pricing, it's localized pricing. And this is, again, what we do, too, and encourage you to do it yourself, is to think about moving beyond just currency rates, for your game. And it says optimize your IAP pricing according to willingness to purchase across all live SKUs. And that's an important point, all live SKUs. So it's not just about, I'm going to we got a special offer in Brazil, I'm going to do something, there. Because if you've done a good job already in monetization, you've fixed your game economy, however your benchmark is, say for the US, when you're thinking about global pricing outside of the U.S. or whatever your target initial country is, it's across all board. You don't want to hurt the game economy, so price adjustments, horizontal price adjustment, same percentage, more or less, up or down. Truth is, if you priced for the U.S., parts around the world, you're going to probably lower the price. But there's some and I guess you appropriate here from the area we are. We have raised price in some of the more oil-rich, your EMENA region countries, Switzerland, some small, rich countries, we actually do raise price. Oddly, Ireland, is one that makes the mix. But what we're seeing is actually 20 to 40% increase of ARPU just by localizing your IAPs. And as I say, your mileage will vary. on that too. So some cases it is lower, 20%. Usually in that case, it's like, I don't know, like Harry Potter from Gem City, we were like 17% too, but that game has like over $2 million addressable revenue too, so that's still quite a bit in terms of dollars to the bottom line. And it's all incremental revenue, right? That's a beautiful thing about pricing. All incremental to what you've already done in terms of monetization of the game. And then, but also from smaller games, we've seen 50, 60% increase in revenue across your target group of countries. What are we doing? It's not about what's going on in your game. It's about what's going on outside of your game, right? So this is what we do, but this information is all publicly available. So you can grab these indices out there. So we create what we call a Wappier index. That we're looking at GDP. We're looking at exchange rates. We're watching how exchange rates fluctuate over time. We just did a recalibration for all our games in Turkey because what happened in Turkey across the board for the game. So but it's also microeconomic data. To try to understand household purchasing power. But then it's overlaying that with game statistics, right? So we look at the smartphone penetration. What's the ratio of iOS versus Android, right? If it's, iOS doesn't matter where you are around the world, you have money, whereas Android, it's a greater diversity of devices, low-end and high-end phones, more price-sensitive potentially. But also it's games, statistics and how people are playing there too, because it's not about sort of GDP in a per country level, it's more about GDP of the gamer population there. And that's what we do, but it's a starting point too, but then what you want to do then is do sequential price evaluations, right? So it's not about just, you got to resist the temptation. I know in the gaming, we're creating a feature and we want to look the next day and see how it's working, right? We're ARP'd out, right, is the most important thing. We care about ARPU on a monthly basis because we're measuring impact on a small group of payers and transactions on an individual country. You need some time. You let those payers and transactions kind of flow through the system. So when we make changes, it's once a month. So make a change, wait a month. So it does require a little bit of patience and sticking with the program, but typically over, we get like 3-4 months to where we think we're kind of optimal price in the demand curve. All right, that's global pricing. It sort of set the stage kind of why. So we started getting this question from a lot of our partners, customers out there, right? So how do you adjust inflation? So funny, it's like a lot of people's sort of knee-jerk reaction is what? Prices going up. I should raise my prices, right? So that's kind of an interesting way to think about it in some ways, because depending on your perspective, you could say like, well, if someone's hurting, across the board, it's a game, it's entertainment, should you raise price? But really, what we did is we put some economists on the job, right? And we put some data scientists. We started looking at data. Look, we live in an inflationary world. So, but, and that's what the data there shows. So but first, sort of, as you maybe heard earlier today, Chris James said, it's kind of cool to hear that the video game market is more than all other entertainment options combined, which is just mind-blowing for us in the industry. But then mobile gaming, right? When you think really started taking off around 2010 with the growth of the iPhone, it's now actually the biggest share of video gaming. So over 50%, that too, $100 billion, and still growing, right? So while I know it's like stressful right now and within games and too, but overall, top publishers, people we're working with, they're still investing and they're still expanding their mobile game. Companies here are participating who are doing good. We heard from Sansoft earlier too, is just starting a new studio in Red. So it's still a bright future for us, but there's still some headwinds, right? And really, the headwinds have come from a couple areas. To be sure, the global pandemic, while on one hand, we all benefited from that during the time, right? So with shelter in place and you can't go out, all your entertainment, everything. So we saw just massive growth in business. Well, now we're comparing ourselves to that. And so, yeah, people went back to work, they went back to school, their other entertainment options open. So we're kind of facing some headwinds when we compare ourselves that way too. That's also then the pandemic then opening up, then sort of, other businesses sort of shut down. So then suddenly we came back to life, we wanted to go out and buy stuff. Well, there's supply chain issues, right? So what happened there, demand far outstripped the available supply. That caused its own sort of pricing issues happen. And that got further exacerbated whenever Russia invaded Ukraine, started the war. Now suddenly oil's more expensive everywhere, so oil underlies everything that we buy. So that's further extended the sort of inflation. So we're living in a world of inflation. We're actually in the highest inflation that we've seen in generation. Some of the data, that's upper chart there, that's actually the US. You can see since 2020, just moving around just 2% rate, up and down around there too. Right around the middle of 2020, sort of just moving up and accelerating into this year. Similar snapshot view of March. That's European. Those are individual European countries. Can't really see them, but midpoint, it's March about 7.5% in Europe. Some lower. France about 5%. Countries like Germany, the Baltic regions also much higher. Netherlands also too. So across the board, European and worldwide, we're seeing the impact. So what's happening with that is that general consumers are tightening their belts. They're reducing their entertainment budgets, right? If again, kind of thinking about the idea, we were asked that question, we just raised price, but in some way, when you think about it, hey, average consumer, they've got a finite wallet, and there's some things that just are not discretionary. I got to buy food, I got to get to work or school, I got medicine. There's some things you just must have, right? So entertainment, discretionary too. But mobile games, it's a pretty perfect alternative. It's a really good substitute versus some other things. So it's much more accessible, right? So even if I'm like unemployed now, I'm kind of sad at my house waiting for the results from my interview, playing a game for free and even if it's just a couple bucks in a week, it's not going to change things for my life that much. And you compare that to other things, like I know it's like here, but like back home, from the US, sporting events are incredibly expensive now. And I like going to live music, and concerts seem to be a lot more expensive than before. And I kind of understand why than before COVID. But versus a game, very inexpensive. And as long as the game is bringing me joy, entertainment, yeah, I'm willing to spend it. So I think we're actually pretty good in that regards. That said, and this really is about inflationary times or before, games with the right pricing model, they're going to be, more competitive versus others, right? There's a lot of games similar, I think card games are very popular, in the region too, right? But there's lots of dominoes games. There's lots of different types of games too. Like if you really thought carefully about how you're pricing that for your players in your game, you're going to have a competitive advantage. And that's what we do, for our partners, and encourage you to do that as well. Still, we wanted to, although, we want to look at the data. So, we talked, inflation is definitely, so we had some economists in job. We used Pearson's correlation coefficient model. We examined the correlation. We tried to understand really what is the impact of inflation on spending in games. First, the data out there, it's correlated. So I guess we would say that a rise in inflation may decrease, ARPU, in the game, and it bears it out. The upper chart there, that's an EMEA country that was declining in ARPU. You can see that, just as it maps up below that, chart below that, it's a rise of inflation. So inflation rising steeply, whereas, in the games dipping down. Similar North America country there, drop in revenue on that matches really nicely with the big increase in inflation. So correlated, related. However, when you peel it away, like I was saying earlier about COVID, it wasn't conclusive, right? So we analyzed revenue. It wasn't conclusive because we couldn't separate the impact of inflation versus the impact of against COVID, right? So now as people working out, going back and everything's changing, other alternative, entertainment options, it was hard to kind of separate it. So we did some analysis in some games that we did. So we took all the information, we put it in our Wappier index, and we did adjustments based on it. So the important thing is to say that it may have had an impact too, but we wanted to do a test, right? And we did do this experiment. So we selected a bunch of different games where we applied, and we took a group of countries, took European countries, we took Asia, Latin America, also, some Africa region, broad selection of countries. We took some games in those countries where we actually raised price 5%, just a modest little increase of 5%. Same games in same countries, then different same countries, different games, but comparable games, substitutes. We actually then raised the price. So we either raised or we lowered the price 5%. What did we find out? The outcome was actually interesting. So high inflation EU countries, most notably Germany, France, Italy, Netherlands, actually responded to an increase in revenue when prices were dropped. So that goes back to the idea of like, hey, if I'm already feeling some pressures, in terms of my wallet, by actually lowering price, maybe being more competitive, they were more price sensitive. So actually lowering price actually helped to increase revenue for those countries. Whereas countries with minimal inflation, most notably Australia, Switzerland, Hong Kong, Japan, with that low inflation, the worldwide we had inflation, but lower inflation was more minimal, that they performed better with higher prices. So we actually raised price, and and so even though they had inflation, maybe they weren't really feeling it that hard, right? They still had not. Because also keep in mind, during this inflationary time, one thing's also true. I've definitely, I know for a fact in the U.S. and a lot of other countries, a lot of places wages have gone up, too. So in many cases, wages, particularly at the lower income levels, have gone up more than inflation. So yes, things are more expensive, but I also have more money, in my wallet. And so what we did, we ran this program over the summer months. We found this out. Our programs represented a revenue increase of between 11% and 33%, compared to the high inflation EU countries. So, when we use this as control in over 3 months. So it worked. We actually moved the bottom line by, so that's advice. And one thing I want to, caveat here is this, it's a little note here. Our data scientists, when we include this, and we did write a blog on this, we put that out there too, but the truth is it's based on a small number of games and countries sampled. One of the challenges was because while we do price a lot of large European countries, the truth is they're not in our control group. So our control is representative, but we didn't have a lot of big, for obvious reasons, we want to price those countries for our customers. So I wouldn't say this would be credible for like an academic journal, subject to peer review. However, these are observations that we did find out, and we do think they kind of hold up, or at least that's my point of view, but I want to give that to comment. So while true, it's hard to parse out the impact caused by inflation exactly, because of the COVID bump, most notably too, and other reasons too. It is still reasonable to say that lowering price in high inflation countries makes sense. By high inflation, I'd say over 7.5%, sort of the average. Raise it, but test it, right? Do everything like every time you think about a good idea for a game anyway. What do? You test it, right? So, but like I was saying earlier, just a reminder is you don't test something look tomorrow because we need measure impact on a per country basis. Let enough payers and transactions through your system. We always do once a month. Let that happen. Look at your ARPU. See how it works for you. Be patient. Let a couple months go. You can always change price. Back to it. So how it works within your game too, or come to us if you have a large enough game. Maybe we can help you. And I would think, this is not from our team. This is kind of Ted Verani, who studied economics as an undergrad opinion, not an economist. So I like to say I studied economics, not an economist. I studied international relations, not a diplomat. But what I think is that, if you can find high inflation with high unemployment, like I was saying earlier, like in the U.S., there's very low unemployment right now, right? It's just we're having a hard time hiring people. Every company's sort of raising wages, which is great, for lower income people. They're not really hurting as bad, other than when some things are just incredibly expensive, automobiles, homes, and the like. But anyway, I think those people. But if you identify a country that has high inflation combined with also high unemployment, that probably is very price sensitive too. So we, that which we would test that there. But in general, whether it is inflation times or not, a global pricing optimization program is important. For you, please, think beyond just ads as monetization. Think about pricing as the other half of the monetization coin. It's the thing that actually makes people stay in your game, so it's much more important, I would say. Pricing your game right is going to be all the difference between driving lifetime value for your game. Again, that's what we do for a lot of people. It works. A couple case studies for you. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I will point out one fact, though, because we get this question a lot. It's not just about increasing revenue, say, lower-income countries like, say, Brazil or Malaysia, Thailand. Check out, this is the WW champions. Check out Germany, Belgium, France, right? Big increase in revenues there, right? Other high-income countries similar to the U.S. Harry Potter here too. Again, big game, $2 million, revenue. Same story across the board globally. We see this impact on high-income, low-income, big country, small-income country. Just don't charge everyone like an American around the world. That's it.